Number 15. Chuck Peck. In 2008, at around 4 p.m. in the San Fernando Valley in California, two trains collided head-on in a terrible accident that would leave 25 people dead and dozens more injured. The cause of the accident? The engineer had been distracted by a text message while on duty. Passenger Charles Chuck Peck was one of those caught amidst the chaos and wreckage of the train crash. His family clung to hope, praying that he had survived the devastation. As firefighters toiled to rescue survivors and retrieve the fallen, Chuck's cell phone became an unfortunate beacon of false hope. Throughout the night, Chuck's loved ones received a barrage of calls from his phone, but when answering, were greeted by static-filled silence. For Chuck's son, CJ, each call represented a glimmer of hope that his father was alive, waiting to be rescued from the wreckage. But each time he answered to be met with static, his certainty wavered. Chuck's family informed first responders that they were receiving calls. Firefighters witnessed as Chuck's fiancée, Andrea Katz, phone lit up with his caller ID. Eagerly, they scoured the wreckage, searching for any sign of his presence. Meanwhile, Chuck's family searched hospitals and reached out to emergency services in a frantic bid to locate him. With each passing hour, their anxiety grew. Then, eventually, the calls ceased, and an hour later, Chuck's body was recovered. He was among the 25 who died in the crash. Overcome by grief, his family also had to answer the mystery of the calls that had tormented them all night. 35 calls had been placed overall. Calls to his fiancée, his sister, his brother, his son, his stepmother. 35 calls over 11 hours, and in the 12th hour, his body was recovered. So had he been desperately trying to reach out to his loved ones until it was too late? Medical examiners found that this could not have been the case. Chuck's autopsy found that he had died on impact. Even more strangely, although pinging his cell phone had led rescuers to locate his body, the phone itself was never found. And so, the mystery remains, leaving many to wonder whether Chuck was reaching out from the beyond to bid a final farewell to those he loved. Number 14. Cassandra Landrum. In the small town of Union City, Georgia, loved ones are still left wondering decades after Cassandra, known as Sandra, Landrum's disappearance on a late September day in 1975. It was an ordinary evening when Sandra left her family's cozy residence to head towards a payphone at a Dairy Queen just half a block from her home. It was a journey she'd made countless times in the past. Little did anyone know that this would be the last time she would set out on it. As dusk settled, 18-year-old Sandra failed to return home. At first, authorities brushed off her disappearance due to her youth, assuming she had ventured off on her own accord in a bid for independence. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the truth began to settle in. Sandra was gone, and someone unknown may have taken her. Just as the town began to resign itself to the haunting silence of unanswered questions, something changed. Sandra's parents found themselves on the receiving end of a series of anonymous phone calls, each one a chilling reminder of their daughter's unknown fate. The voice on the other end whispered claims that Sandra had met a tragic end. She'd been murdered. Despite exhaustive searches and relentless inquiries, no trace of Sandra Landrum has ever been found, and the anonymous caller has never been identified. Nearly 50 years on, Sandra's fate, potentially hinted at by those eerie anonymous phone calls, remains unknown, and her family still seeks closure. Information about this missing person can be directed to Union City Police Department, 770-964-1333. Number 13. Brian Dos Santos. On a balmy afternoon in Fort Myers, Florida, Maria de Fatima Ramos dos Santos stood at a bus stop, cradling her 3-week-old son, Brian, in her arms. Beside her, waiting for the approaching bus, stood her friend. It seemed to be a normal day, until something completely unexpected unfolded. The scene was right out of a parent's worst nightmare. A black SUV rumbled to a halt beside them, its windows tinted against the glare of the sun. From within emerged a Hispanic woman, her voice urgent as she sought directions to Pine Manor. Maria and her friend kindly tried to help her. It seemed a simple enough thing to do, and when the bus they were waiting for arrived, Maria and her friend boarded as normal. Little did they know, things weren't normal. The woman in the SUV trailed behind in pursuit. Once they departed the bus, Maria and her friend were greeted once again by the strange woman who seemed desperate. She even offered them money in exchange for guidance. All too trusting, Maria and her friend accepted the invitation, entering the SUV where they began to feel some apprehension. Their gut feeling was warranted. In the blink of an eye, the atmosphere shifted as the strange woman drew a knife and ordered Maria and her friend out of the vehicle. As the SUV sped away, Brian remained captive. Before departing, the kidnapper seized Maria's cell phone, leaving behind a cryptic message she left at a local business that said, "Go to Pine Manor. You go to Pine Manor, 11th Street. Oh, okay. But how long will it be before you get here? Because I have to take the girls back. Okay. I'll call you back. Okay. All right. Okay. Bye-bye." The kidnapper called this number twice, leaving investigators to believe she was familiar with it. As the investigation wore on, theories of human trafficking fueled speculation surrounding the search for Brian. In fact, 4 hours prior to Brian's abduction, the same woman in the SUV attempted the same scheme on a grandmother with her infant grandchild. When this attempt failed, she continued in pursuit of another victim. The motive of this kidnapper is still unknown. Was it kidnapping to raise the child as her own? Human trafficking? Detectives still do not know for sure. And 17 years on, Brian's fate remains unknown. Information about this missing person can be directed to Fort Myers Police Department, 239-321-7700. Number 12. Dave Krupa. Dave Krupa's world turned upside down when his phone began to buzz incessantly with a flood of messages from an obsessive stalker. "My favorite thing to do is stand outside and stare at you," read one message among dozens blowing up his phone. For 3 long years, Krupa endured an onslaught of tens of thousands of texts and emails from his tormentor, initially laced with obsessive jealousy and rage, before escalating into chilling threats. "I hate you so much that I want to drive a knife in your heart," one message seethed. Another vowed, "I will destroy your life and take your happiness." Despite changing his phone number numerous times, the messages persisted, leaving Krupa feeling like every moment of his life was being invaded. The sender, identified as Carrie Farver, was a woman Krupa had briefly dated in Omaha, Nebraska, but who he had not seen in a number of years. As the harassment intensified, Farver's digital presence haunted Krupa's every waking moment, while her physical location remained a mystery. The harassment eventually extended beyond Krupa to others in his life, including his ex-girlfriend, Amy Flora, and a former fling, Shanna Elizabeth Gollier. Gollier, who had briefly dated Krupa, suddenly found herself targeted by the same venomous messages Dave was receiving. At the same time, friends and family of Farver became alarmed, as very few of them had seen or heard from the woman in some time. But as the years passed and the harassment continued unabated, detectives Ryan Avis and Jim Doughty of the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office took up the case, intrigued by Farver's disappearance and her targeted attack. Their investigation uncovered a chilling trail of evidence implicating a seemingly shocking suspect, Gollier, one of the supposed victims of the harassment campaign. Was Gollier the mastermind behind the torment? With meticulous digital forensics, they pieced together Gollier's elaborate scheme, revealing how she impersonated Farver online and orchestrated a campaign of terror from the shadows. Whereas it was previously thought that Farver had up and vanished, leaving friends and family behind in the midst of a mental health episode that also led her to harass and stalk her ex-lover, police began to believe that she had been murdered. As the detectives closed in on their suspect, Gollier's facade began to crumble. Confronted with the damning evidence against her, she spun a funhouse mirror of lies in a desperate attempt to evade justice. But truth is truth. In a stunning courtroom revelation, Gollier was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Yet even behind bars, she clung to her claims of innocence, refusing to acknowledge the devastation she had wrought. For Krupa and Farver's loved ones, the verdict brought a measure of closure, some small amount of justice in the face of unspeakable tragedy. Farver remains a missing person. Information about her case can be directed to Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office, 712-890-2221. Number 11. Amber Tuckerow. In the quiet moments of her day, Vivian Tuckerow is haunted by the memory of her daughter, Amber, who fell victim to a mysterious crime when she was just 20 years old. Amber's disappearance tore a hole in her family's lives, leaving behind a devastating scar. Amber had been a mother herself, leaving behind her son, Jacob, who was just a baby when his mother vanished. It was August 18th, 2010, when she was last seen in Nisku, Alberta, just outside of Edmonton. She had arrived with Jacob and a friend, planning to stay in the area for a few days. But Amber's excitement had led her to hitchhike into the city that very night, a heartbreaking decision that would change everything. She was last seen getting into a vehicle driven by an unknown man. When she failed to return, panic set in. Her friend called Vivian, who then reached out to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Weeks passed, and still there was no sign of Amber. Then, on August 28, 2012, a glimmer of hope, as the RCMP released a chilling recording of a conversation Amber had with the unidentified man, recorded after she had dialed emergency services. In the call, Amber is heard asking the man where he's taking her. She seems suspicious that he's lying to her, as they're headed on a gravel back road instead of into the city. She says, "You'd better not be taking me anywhere I don't want to go." In the final moments of the call, the man claims he is taking her to 50th Street, and she seems to accept this. The call ends. The release of this phone call was a desperate plea for answers, for any clue that could lead police to Amber. But answers never came, and on September 1st, 2012, just days after the audio was released, Amber's remains were found on a rural property near Leduc County. The discovery only deepened the mystery surrounding her disappearance, leaving Vivian to grapple with the identity of that unknown driver, the male voice on Amber's final phone call. The way the case was handled left Vivian feeling betrayed and abandoned. According to Vivian, the police had dismissed her concerns, downplaying Amber's disappearance and even removing her from the missing persons list after just 1 month. To Vivian, the dismissal of her daughter's case was just the latest in a long history of neglect surrounding the cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women in Canada and across the United States. Vivian fought tooth and nail to keep her daughter's memory alive, filing complaints, speaking out against the injustices she had faced. Like many cases of missing Indigenous women, the investigation surrounding Amber's case seemed to be deficient. Vivian traveled to Ottawa, joined by countless families who shared her pain and her outrage after losing loved ones themselves. Together, they demanded justice, a recognition of the lives that had been lost and the voices that had been silenced. In the face of unimaginable loss, Vivian remains a voice for the voiceless, and 13 years on, she continues to solicit tips on Amber's killer from the public. Any information about the murder can be directed to the Leduc RCMP detachment at 780-980-7267. Number 10. Brandon Swanson. As the last day of classes wound down at the Minnesota West Community and Technical College, Brandon Swanson, a 19-year-old freshman, was looking forward to the freedom of summer alongside his friends. But before long, Brandon found himself in a predicament. He phoned his parents, Annette and Brian Swanson, shortly after midnight on May 14, 2008, explaining that he had veered off the road while driving in Lind, Minnesota, crashing his car into a ditch. Concerned, his parents set out in their pickup truck on a late-night rescue mission, guided by Brandon's instructions over the phone. He was absolutely positive he knew where he was, Brian recalled. Yet, upon their arrival at the designated spots, their hearts sank as they found no trace of Brandon or his car. Flashing their truck's lights in an attempt to signal him, they searched futilely as Brandon let them know that he was flashing his own in response. "Don't you see me?" he asked through the phone. They saw nothing, and Brandon's whereabouts remained a mystery as the night stretched on. Believing he saw the lights of a nearby town, Brandon kept in touch via phone, traversing fields and fences in the area as he continued to attempt to guide his parents to his approximate location. 47 minutes into this journey, his parents heard what would be his last words through the phone. He shouted an expletive and then suddenly went silent. The call dropped, and further calls his parents made to him went straight to voicemail. As dawn broke, Annette made the agonizing decision to contact the authorities. At first, police allegedly dismissed the report, saying that going off to spend some time away from family was normal young adult behavior after finishing exams, despite the mysterious and concerning circumstances. Eventually, however, police officers joined the frantic search for Brandon. They were able to ping his cell phone, which was still functioning, and triangulated the location of his last call. It was 20 miles from where Brandon had told his parents that he believed he was. Still, their efforts yielded no clues as to his physical whereabouts. Eventually, Brandon's vehicle was found after police started searching the area of that final phone call. In a remote corner of Porter, Minnesota, Brandon's car stood abandoned, leaving only more questions as to what happened to its driver. Investigators combed the scene for clues, but found nothing of substance. And as weeks became months, the trail grew cold. The Swansons refused to give up, and in their continued pursuit of the truth, Brandon's law was passed by state officials in 2009. The law requires police investigations of any missing person to be initiated promptly, regardless of their age. Although it's still a mystery what happened to Brandon Swanson, it has been proposed that he may have fallen into the Yellow Medicine River and drowned. But that's just one theory. Foul play hasn't been ruled out either. Neither his remains, his phone, nor his keys have ever been found. Information about this missing person can be directed to BCA at 651-793-7000. Number 9. Dale Williams. A family outing on a lazy Sunday in Montrose County, Colorado, took a chilling turn on July 4th, 1999. The family noticed a pickup truck submerged in the waters of the lake they were swimming in. Immediately uneasy, they contacted the sheriff's department, not knowing that they would be the first to report what would become the foundations of a complex mystery. The truck belonged to Dale Williams, a pillar of the community and a devoted family man. Dale had vanished without a trace 6 weeks prior, leaving behind many unanswered questions. His absence left the tight-knit town of Nucla, where he owned and operated an auto body shop, reeling. On the night of his disappearance, Dale failed to return home for dinner, which was unlike him. As his wife, Diana, grew more and more anxious, the hours ticked by. When Dale had not returned home by morning, Diana knew something was gravely wrong and began searching for her husband. The first stop was his body shop, where she found things left as if he'd just walked out. The door unlocked, a van with the hood up, tools laying about. As investigators pieced together the puzzle of Dale's last known whereabouts, disturbing details emerged. Dale's last encounter with a family friend, Tammy Lawrence, ended in an abrupt departure, which strayed from his usual routine. He said he was on his way to help a stranded motorist, but to Tammy, he seemed uneasy. Pastor Tom Ross, a trusted friend, recounted Dale's final moments at the auto body shop, where a cryptic phone call added to the mystery. Ross recalled Dale saying the caller had broken down about 3/4 of a mile east of the Bedrock, Colorado store. Dale's friends thought it strange that he'd be called for roadside assistance, since Dale was not a mechanic, but he seemed determined to help the stranded motorist. The identity of this caller, perhaps the last person to have seen Dale alive, has never been uncovered. In the aftermath of Dale's disappearance, the community rallied behind his family in an effort to help find him. Their efforts hampered by a series of inexplicable events. Missing posters, plastered across town, vanished without a trace, their disappearance fueling speculation. A surveillance camera captured the image of a shadowy figure, tearing down the flyers with seemingly malicious intent. The man turned out to be a former friend of the couple. His connection to Dale and Diana raised a number of questions. Yet despite their suspicions and his strange behavior, authorities struggled to find concrete evidence linking him to Dale's disappearance. But for Diana, the pieces of the puzzle began to come together. A past altercation with the former friend emerged as a possible motive for Dale's disappearance. Resentment and betrayal. Dale and Diana had helped the man's ex-wife move to another state without his knowledge. Could this be motive enough for murder? Possibly. Underscoring this theory was a strange message delivered to Dale's shop a month after helping the ex-wife move, in the form of torn-up photos of Dale and Diana with their now divorced friends, along with numerous .22 caliber rounds. And not long after, a .22 caliber revolver was delivered into the drop box of the video store Diana worked at. As the question of Dale's fate loomed over Montrose County, Diana clung to some small hope. Yet with no further leads or evidence, authorities have not been able to charge anyone with Dale's disappearance, and his remains have not been found. Information about this missing person can be directed to Montrose County Sheriff's Office at 970-249-9110 or Montrose Regional Crime Stoppers at 970-249-8500. Number 8. Dorothy Jane Scott. Dorothy Jane Scott led a life that seemed unremarkable to most. A single mother living in Anaheim, California, and working as a secretary, She was known for her devout church attendance and her peaceful demeanor. A friend lovingly called her dull as a phone book, but her quiet demeanor belied the chilling mystery that would eventually befall her. It all began with a phone call. The voice on the other end was both familiar and menacing, alternating between expressions of love and hate, before descending into outright threats. Dorothy had no idea who the caller was, but she knew he was watching her every move. At first, the calls came relentlessly, day after day, leaving her shaken and fearful for her safety. Despite her terror, Dorothy remained determined to protect herself and her young son. She took up karate for self-defense and even considered arming herself, though she ultimately decided against it. The caller remained enigmatic, never revealing his name or location, but he seemed to know everything about Dorothy, where she lived, where she worked, and even what she wore day to day. Despite her efforts to shield herself and her young son from the caller, Dorothy couldn't escape the suffocating grip of fear and anxiety that followed his calls. She told friends that the voice on the other end of the line was hauntingly familiar, yet she couldn't place it, despite her best efforts. As the calls grew in frequency, Dorothy's sense of dread deepened. She confided in a trusted coworker, sharing details of the menacing calls, but there was no solace to be found. Without knowing the caller, what actions could she take against him? The tension reached a fevered pitch on a strange evening in May 1980. At a routine company meeting, Dorothy's coworker, Conrad, fell ill after being bitten by a black widow spider. Concerned for his well-being, Dorothy and another coworker accompanied him to the hospital, unaware that this act of kindness would seal Dorothy's fate. As she left the hospital to retrieve her car, the stalker finally struck. Dorothy's colleagues were waiting at the entrance of the hospital to pull her car around, and when they saw her white station wagon approaching, they signaled their location to her. But the car careened by, leaving her coworkers stunned and her family with many unanswered questions. The later discovery of her abandoned car only deepened the mystery. In the months that followed, Dorothy's family was tormented by a series of chilling phone calls from the unknown caller, claiming to have killed her and taunting them with details of her disappearance. Despite their best efforts, the police were unable to trace the calls or identify the caller, leaving Dorothy's loved ones to endure an agonizing wait for answers. As the weeks turned into months, the mystery of Dorothy's disappearance only became murkier. Rumors swirled, with some speculating that she had run away or fallen victim to foul play. But her family refused to give up hope, clinging to the belief that Dorothy would one day return home, safe and sound. Then, more than 4 years after her disappearance, a breakthrough finally came. Dorothy's remains were discovered in a remote construction site, bringing a grim end to the agonizing uncertainty that had plagued her loved ones for so long. The discovery brought some closure to her grieving family, but the mystery of her murder remained unsolved. In the years that followed, Dorothy continued to evade justice, leaving her family to grapple with their loss. Though they may never find the closure they seek, Dorothy's memory lives on in the hearts of those who loved her. Despite the passage of time, the memory of Dorothy's disappearance still occupies those who knew her. Dorothy's family has struggled to come to terms with the loss of their beloved daughter, sister, and mother. Dorothy's case remains unsolved, relegated to the cold case files of the Anaheim Police Department. Despite their best efforts, investigators are no closer to identifying her than they had been on the day she disappeared. The passage of time has only served to obscure the truth further, but her friends and family remain hopeful that one day, justice will be served. Number 7. Albert Allen Challam, and Meyer Lehman, in the heart of Coltsneck, a wealthy enclave of horse farms and grand estates in New Jersey. A mansion of secrets stood on Bluebell Road. Behind its imposing black and gold gates, a Grecian fountain stood as a sentry over the evil acts that took place there. It was beneath the gaze of the fountain statue that the bodies of Albert Allen Challam and Meyer Lehman were discovered, their lives brutally extinguished in a hail of bullets. From the start, police believed the crime had the markings of a mob-related hit. Yet despite the significant investigation, the identity of the men's assailant remains unknown. Challam and Lehman, two penny stock promoters known for dubious financial schemes, had drawn the ire of many with their nefarious activities. But as investigators delved into their murky past, they unearthed a labyrinth of deceit and treachery that stretched far beyond the confines of the mansion's walls. The FBI and local authorities were drawn into the fray, their efforts hampered by a lack of concrete evidence and very little that might point them in the direction of the killer. The clues they did find included phone records, trails of blood, and whispered confessions. A potential lead emerged from a cryptic voice message discovered on Challam's answering machine. The brief but urgent message pleaded, "Call me back. Emergency." Investigators believed that the caller might know more about the slayings and was perhaps aware of the impending threat over the lives of Challam and Lehman and wanted to forewarn them. As the investigation dragged on, alliances shifted and numerous suspects emerged. From Russian gangsters to shady stock deals, every lead seemed to hit a dead end. There seemed to be motive everywhere, and the victims appeared to be keeping many secrets. The last person believed to have seen the men alive was an associate, Joe T. Logan Jr. Though not a suspect, he was at the Bluebell Road mansion that morning and called the house 6 times later that day. Yet the identity of the mystery caller, whose voicemail may have been an attempt to warn of the coming tragedy, and the assailant who carried out the brutal murders, both remain unknown. Information on the murders of Challam and Lehman can be directed to the FBI's Criminal Division at 212-384-1000. Number 6. Deborah Wolfe. Deborah Ann Wolfe, known to loved ones as Debbie, embodied the warmth of a southern summer day. By the age of 28, she had moved from her home state of Arkansas to Fayetteville, North Carolina, where she lived in a lovely log cabin. Here, she cultivated her passion for healing as a nurse at the Veterans Administration Medical Center in Cumberland County. Debbie's compassion knew no bounds. Many remember her as a dedicated and gentle spirit, touching the lives of all who crossed her path. A columnist of the Fayetteville Times hailed her as a beacon of light, a dedicated nurse, a radiant soul, a cherished friend. Yet, in the winter of 1985, a day before Christmas, tragedy struck when Debbie Wolfe disappeared, seemingly into thin air. The first red flag was when Debbie failed to arrive at work. This was completely unlike Debbie, who was a consistent employee and not known to be late or miss a shift without calling ahead. Concern soon rippled through her family, and as dawn broke on the 27th of December, Debbie's absence grew alarming. Her mother, Jenny, accompanied by her husband, John, and a loyal friend, headed to Debbie's cabin for a wellness check. But the cabin stood silent, though her dogs, Morgan and Mason, remained in the yard. Inside the cabin, things were amiss. Her personal items seemed to be in disarray, which was not in line with Debbie's usually orderly ways. A nursing uniform lay discarded, and underneath her bed, Jenny discovered her daughter's purse, also out of place. To put it simply, the scene was odd and suspect. And to add to this scene, a mysterious and unfamiliar voice was heard on the answering machine. delivering a cryptic message. "Hey Deb, missed you here at work today. Just wondering how you're doing. If you're able to give me a call up here at the ward, I'm at, or give me a call at home tonight. You've been out a lot of days. You make me worried when you miss another one. Just want to make sure you're okay. Bye." Jenny wondered about the implications of the message as the search for Debbie began. Time passed, yielding only more questions. Then, on the 31st of December, despair was found at the bottom of a nearby pond. Debbie's lifeless body was discovered in a rusty barrel. Yet, even in death, mysteries lingered. The police began to investigate the death as an accidental drowning, a slip and fall. But Jenny was sure foul play had been involved. Investigators decided to retrieve the barrel the day after removing her body, but when they returned for it, it was gone. Investigators even allegedly denied the existence of the barrel in the first place. This only added to the strange turns in the case. The autopsy further found the cause of death to be drowning, and there were no obvious signs of foul play. However, even this was suspect to some. Several of the telltale signs of drowning were missing, and there was only about half a teaspoon of water in Debbie's airway. Due to the cold water slowing decomposition, medical examiners were unable to determine exactly when Debbie died. Jenny was suspicious for a number of other reasons as well. Not only was the pond shallow and easy to walk out of, the clothes Debbie was found in weren't her own. They included shoes that were a men's size 6, brown corduroy pants that were too big for her, a bra that was the wrong size, and an army field jacket without a name tag. Two suspects, hospital volunteers who had repeatedly called and harassed Debbie, were questioned, including the one who Jenny believed left the cryptic voicemail on her phone. Each was cleared by police. The case is still officially considered an accidental drowning, though Debbie's loved ones remain determined to see justice prevail. Number 5. Rebecca Gabriella Nuno. In the historic town of Cedar Hill, Texas, Rebecca Nuno's life changed unalterably on the evening of May 31st, 2005. As work came to an end, the 21-year-old bid farewell to her co-workers as she finished up her shift. Yet for Rebecca, the journey home would become a harrowing ordeal that would leave her loved ones in despair. Her co-workers shortly received a phone call from Rebecca, who whispered a desperate plea. "I've been kidnapped." The call dropped, and then silence. From that moment, 21-year-old Rebecca vanished into the void, leaving behind only suspicion of what had happened to her. She indeed appeared to have been taken against her will, perhaps a victim of human trafficking. She may even have known her abductor. After 2 weeks without answers, another phone call, this time to her parents. The voice was again a whisper, as she insisted they stop looking for her. She spoke in Spanish and would not confirm if she was all right, or if she was even in the US. As investigators hit dead ends, they did arrive at a description of a suspect, a Hispanic male, possibly driving a green Honda or a black Chevrolet truck. She was believed to have been taken either to Florida or to Mexico, but no further traces of her have been found. Information on her case can be directed to Duncanville Police Department, 972-780-5037. Number 4. Justin Bergwinkle. An ambitious recruit to the United States Army, Private Justin Bergwinkle had aspirations that reached beyond the confines of ordinary service. His heart was set on making it into the elite Rangers, a position for those with unusual dedication and ambition. Armed with high scores in army tests and a mastery of languages, particularly Korean, Justin seemed destined for greatness. But fate had other plans. 3 years into his service, while stationed at Fort Ord in Monterey, California, Justin vanished without a trace, his disappearance sending shockwaves through the military community. 3 long months passed before a breakthrough emerged, or so it seemed. Justin's car surfaced in the parking lot of a motel. Locked inside were his keys, wallet, credit cards, and military ID. Yet there were no clues as to where Justin may be. Closest to him at the time was his girlfriend, Yolanda Antunes, who noticed a gradual shift in Justin's demeanor in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. His behavior grew increasingly erratic, marked by clandestine meetings and secrecy. She wondered if this had something to do with his military work, or if there was something more sinister he was hiding. Justin's visits to Yolanda, who attended Santa Clara University, about 80 miles away from Fort Ord, revealed glimpses of a double life. Mysterious, sudden trips back to Monterey with a briefcase hinted at something amiss. Soon, Justin's behavior spiraled further, culminating in a strange phone call involving a cryptic message signaling the end of an unknown mission. Yolanda had been the one to pick up. "The mission's off," a stranger's voice said. When Yolanda questioned him, the voice responded, "Just tell him the mission's off." When Yolanda confronted Justin, she was met with defiance and evasion. He then returned to Fort Lewis after buying handguns and ammunition, but he failed to show up and was reported AWOL. He resurfaced at Yolanda's apartment, making cryptic references to the Hollywood thriller White Sands, which centers around international arms smuggling. This offered little solace to Yolanda, as he resumed his secretive trips to Fort Ord. She encouraged him to call Fort Lewis, where he was still considered AWOL. Although he did call and state that he was planning to return, he never did. And then, again, he vanished. Months passed without any contact. There were no leads until Justin's car was found. Amongst the evidence were his military dog tags. Yolanda recalled a moment with Justin where he explained what the dog tags were used for. According to her, he said, "Well, when a soldier dies, they put it in his teeth so you can identify him. If you ever see these, lying around, that means I'm dead." The memory resonated, leaving her and everyone with so many questions. Was Justin involved in some undercover work? Was he entangled in an illegal operation? Or had he gone out of his mind? What's more, was he dead or alive? To this day, Justin Bergwinkle has never been found. Information about this missing person can be directed to Monterey Police Department at 831-646-3830. Number 3. The Kuykendalls. In the wild corners of Washington state, 3 families found themselves ensnared in a nightmare beyond their comprehension. It began with murmured phone calls placed to their personal cell phones, turning their every buzz into paranoid fear. Heather Kuykendall recounted the chilling messages that besieged her family. The messages said, "You're going to die. We hate you. We're going to murder you," she revealed. And yet, the police, bewildered by the inexplicable nature of the harassing calls, found themselves coming up empty, as any sort of suspect evaded them. For the Kuykendall family, the nightmare began innocuously enough. A text message sent from their daughter's phone to their friends, without her sending it. From there, the threats began and quickly escalated. Callers saying they'd kill their grandparents, their children, and their pets. But the horror did not end with mere words. The perpetrators delved deeper into the family's private lives. The other families targeted had ties to the Kuykendall family. The callers knew their movements, their conversations, everything down to what they were wearing. The calls came at all hours and were strangely traced back to the Kuykendall family's own phones, even when they were shut off. Surveillance experts explained that cell phones can be operated remotely, saying you can track a person's position, you can take photographs, you can infiltrate every aspect of their lives. And this seems to be the case with the Kuykendall family. Their phones even shut off on their own. Their ringtones changed inexplicably, and the restricted phone calls continued to roll in. But even armed with this knowledge, traced calls led to dead ends. Investigations yielded no answers, and the family grew more and more anxious. Voicemails even began playing back recordings of private family conversations, and even a clip of a discussion with their local police detective, and a warning to them to stay away from the law. The case clearly seemed to be some sort of cell phone manipulation, but investigators were still clueless as to how and who. Pranksters? Cyberbullying? Maybe. Most calls seem to focus on the Kuykendall's teenage daughter, Courtney. One chilling message directed towards her stated ominously, "I know where you are. I know where you live. I'm going to kill you." But other messages were described as sounding juvenile, like a teenage prank. The case never saw any resolution. Once the FBI were involved, some sources say the calls ended, but the hacker was never found. Each of these cases leaves listeners with trepidation. In many, a phone call is often followed by fear and paranoia. Ring, ring. Don't answer that. Number 2. Bashir Khouchakji. Bashir Khouchakji sat in his small apartment in Washington, D.C., the phone buzzing incessantly in the background. The buzzing had terrorized his life for the past 9 years. It hadn't always been like this, but at times it had been much worse. His mind drifted back to 1974, to the streets of Beirut, where he had been raised. By this time, he was already an American citizen. He had returned to Lebanon with his wife, who had business there. That night, he had encountered a roadblock while picking his wife up from a party. He remembered the van, the armed men, the abduction. Captured by the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, his captors had accused him of being a CIA agent, subjecting him to days of torture. It was an ordeal he barely survived, his sanity hanging by a thread as he grappled with hallucinations and despair. Returning to the United States hadn't brought solace to Bashir. Instead, a new kind of torment seemed to have been awakened. The threatening phone calls began a few years after his return from Lebanon. The caller's voice, a chilling whisper. Sometimes it was silent breathing. Other times there were threats, but always the same underlying message. He would be killed. The calls followed him like a shadow, even as he tried to rebuild his life with new restaurants and new beginnings. But the terror didn't stop at the phone calls. It spilled over into his family's lives, his loved ones becoming targets of the same faceless menace. His wife, his friends, even his replacement at the restaurant, all of them drawn into the mystery enveloping him. And then there was Raj Tuli, his successor, whose son fell victim to a brutal attack. This in particular, Khouchakji took as a sign that the mysterious caller meant business. The caller's identity remained a mystery, the voice shifting curiously between that of a child and that of a grown man, thus lending a nickname to the caller, l'enfant. Bashir's mind raced with suspicions, memories of Beirut mingling with the present-day nightmare. Was it revenge for his abduction? A vendetta from his past come back to haunt him? Or perhaps something even darker, its motives unknown? Desperate for answers, Bashir turned to the authorities, but with no leads, they were powerless in the face of this masked villain. The FBI tapped his phone, recording thousands of calls, but the trail always led to dead end after dead end. Journalists probed, speculation swirled, and yet l'enfant remained elusive. In the end, Bashir found himself trapped in a cycle of paranoia and despair, his sanity slipping away. He sought refuge in psychiatric wards, hoping to escape the calls, but even there, he found no peace. The caller would still reach out to him multiple times a day. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the calls stopped, their mysterious cessation equally infuriating. Bashir's story had been the subject of a segment on the popular TV show Unsolved Mysteries shortly before they ceased. Perhaps l'enfant was scared off by the national publicity. Years passed. Bashir tried to move on and leave the nightmare behind him. But despite the absence of phone calls, l'enfant and his sinister games still play on his mind. Number 1. JFK. On a November morning in 1963, just a few hours before the world would change forever, a switchboard in Oxnard, California hummed with activity. A seasoned operator with the General Telephone Company picked up the line just after 10 a.m., expecting a routine call like those she dealt with dozens of times per day. Yet, instead of a clear voice on the other end, she encountered only static, a fuzzy noise that immediately indicated that something was amiss. Perplexed but vigilant, the operator remained attentive, her ears pricked for any sign of distress from the person on the other line. Then, suddenly, she could hear a whispered voice. Perturbed, she beckoned to a coworker to hop on the line to hear this caller. "The president is going to die at 10:10, the whisperer rasped, leaving both operators stunned. Glancing at the clock, they noticed that 10:10 was just minutes away. A few moments passed, with both operators stunned and unsure how to proceed, before the voice amended their earlier prediction: the president is going to die at 10:30. Dismissed initially as the ramblings of a troubled mind, the operators disconnected the call around 10:25, blissfully unaware of what was unfolding in another part of the country. At that very moment, President John F. Kennedy's motorcade was cruising the streets of Dallas for the last time. At 12:30 p.m. in Dallas, Texas, which was 10:30 a.m. California time, a gunshot shattered the nation. The assassination of JFK continues to be shrouded in mystery and speculation 60 years on. Many are familiar with the layers of conspiracy surrounding the assassination. Investigators and armchair detectives alike have speculated about multiple shooters, internal government conspiracies, and even tragic accidents. But many people are not aware of the Oxnard call, as reported by the Star Advertiser in 2013. The phone call, even half a century later, is just one of the many cryptic footnotes in a saga rife with unanswered questions. An FBI report made at the time indicated that the call was reported to them around an hour after the shooting. The Oxnard Press Courier and Ventura Star Free Press chronicled the anonymous call, their headlines echoing the nation's bewilderment. Details emerged. The caller remained veiled in anonymity, but reports describing the voice like that of a middle-aged woman. The operators recounted the whispered prophecies. The voice had whispered, "The justice, the Supreme Court. There's going to be fire in all the windows. The government is going up in flames." And later, The government takes over everything: lock, stock, and barrel. The operators, who eventually ended the call thinking the person on the other end was mentally ill, recalled as many details as they could. According to an FBI report, it was their impression that the unidentified woman caller was quite disturbed. Disturbed or not, the timing makes this mysterious phone call even more disturbing. Even more so when on the other side of the world, another mysterious call came in, this one to a British journalist at Cambridge News. The journalist lifted the receiver to words whispered by an anonymous voice. "Call the US Embassy for some big news." The call then disconnected. Perplexed yet intrigued, the journalist dialed the number to the American Embassy, where he relayed the cryptic message to officials. 25 minutes after the Cambridge call, the president was assassinated. In shock and disbelief, the British journalist relayed the details of the anonymous call to the authorities, which sparked a flurry of activity among intelligence agencies on both sides of the Atlantic. A memo, dated just days after the president's death, outlined the call, its timing eerily coinciding with this turning point in American history. As time marched on in the wake of the tragedy, much like the switchboard operator in California, the British journalist continued to wonder about the identity of the mysterious caller and their eerie premonition. Neither calls led to any leads, but neither caller was ever identified.